Trolls have been around in Scandinavian myth, fairy tales and folklore since at least the Viking Age. We know this because there have been mentions of trolls in the Icelandic tales about the Old Norse gods. Thor, the thunder god, was particularly in heated fights with them several times. Sometimes they seem to be the same species as giants, the Jotnar. There are several common traits between them, and what really speaks to this theory is the fact that the Icelandic tales about the giants are more or less the exact same stories that are told about the trolls in the rest of Scandinavia. Throughout history, it seems like they more and more get separated into two different types of beings. Up in the northern part of Sweden, they seem to blend with the being Vittra. That was a word for most magical and supernatural beings. And in the south, they remained as trolls, but was later in time very much separated from the giants. Except for sometimes being called giants, trolls have not had that many other names. The word troll has instead been used as a Noah name for other beings. Troll could mean anything that was unexplainable and supernatural or strange, and they also very often get blamed for when things went wrong. Trolls are, after all, perceived as chaotic beings that mostly like to cause mischief and trouble, and also love to steal things. Many of the strange things the people of old times saw in nature was blamed on trolls. Deep holes in the ground was because there was a troll that had put their cauldron there. Strange mushrooms was called troll mushrooms, and when people from the 16th century found rock carvings from the Bronze Age, this was thought to be magical carvings that trolls had made. The Nordic version of troll is far from the idea of troll you meet in fairy tales. Most people think about trolls just the way the artist John Bauer painted them. Big noses, big ears, and clumsy and ape-like shapes of their bodies. This is not the sole and only truth in the Scandinavian folklore. Trolls are possibly the most heterogenic group of Scandinavian supernatural beings, and they can really look like, well, anything and everything. Since trolls had a big ability with magic, they could take the shape they liked, so they could even shape themselves into animals or even inanimate objects. Most common, they look like people, except that they have something that is unusual, like a very big nose, uncommonly big ears, or a tail. Especially the women are often described as very beautiful, and there are a lot of stories about marriage between humans and trolls, where the troll woman was flirting with a man and he was smart enough to throw some steel over her. That broke the bond to the mountain, and she had to come home with him and became his wife. Not the most pleasant stories, if you think of it. It kind of reflects the idea that women married who they was told to. But in the stories, the troll women never seemed to mind following the young man home. Usually she was after that an obedient and very good housewife, and even though her troll father might not be so happy about his daughter moving in with the humans, he usually left a big pile of gold as a dowry. So a man that married a troll was never in risk of being poor. It is hard to talk about trolls without mentioning the actual racist idea that was behind them. Trolls were something that was strange and dangerous, and a lot of the traits they was described with was dark hair, dark skin, and other traits that was not of the most common traits for the Scandinavian people. Actually, it is a fact that people of other cultures get blamed for being trolls, and Samic people and Jewish people were especially targeted for this. Sorry for ruining your view of trolls, but it is a sad and uncomfortable fact, and I think that sadly when we talk about trolls, we talk about a lot of real tragic human history. But we'll get into that later. Let's first start with the change between the trolls that was around during Viking Age and the trolls that was around after we got Christianed. We don't know much about the Viking Age. There we mostly got the stories about them and the gods butting heads. It seemed that people interacted with them already that far back into history. That conclusion comes from the fact that there are a lot of stories about how trolls get very annoyed when Christianity became a religion, and that they certainly did not like that change. They were scared of the white Christ, and they could not bear to hear the church bells. A lot of them tried to crash the churches by throwing huge rocks at the buildings, but the churches was of course protected against evil, so the stones never reached the target. Those stones could be seen in nature, just as you could see big holes after the big cauldrons. Today we know that these stones and holes are from the Ice Age, when the heavy ice moved stones under it. But for people back in the old days, it was of course strange and impossible to explain how a big rock just appeared far away from the mountain like that. Trolls was an easy way to explain this. Still today, the deep holes in the ground created from the Ice Age are called troll cauldrons in Sweden. Despite the stories about the church bells' annoyance for the trolls, and that they moved up further in the mountains and forests to get away from them, trolls was a very common supernatural being in the whole of Scandinavia from Viking Age and forward. The belief in the god Thor actually lived on long even after we got Christianized, thanks to the trolls. Even after people stopped believing in the Aesir, Thor was the god of thunder, and as mentioned earlier, he had a strong hatred for trolls and liked to hunt them. When the thunder was raging in the sky, people used to say that Thor was out hunting for trolls, and when people found stone axes in the ground, they called them Torsviggar and said that was the proof that Thor had been hunting there. When the trolls was not running for their lives from Thor, they liked to live in big families, just like humans. They even got their own cattle. They lived in giant caves in mountain halls where they gathered unbelievable size of gold and other treasures. And in these halls they bore children, churned butter, baked, washed their clothes, and did all those things that normal human does. The stories about the trolls are many, and since they lived and behaved very similar to people, they also interacted a lot with us. Sometimes it was really hard to even know if it was a troll or a person you interacted with, since trolls had so much magic that they could look, well, like anything from a beautiful woman to a pot. As mentioned, trolls didn't have that many Noah names, but the trolls themselves, though, used Noah names for things. So a good way of knowing if it was a troll you spoke to was to notice if they said earwig instead of scissor, or the big dog instead of a bear. If you noticed that it was a troll you spoke to, it was best to hold up some kind of steel item. That would protect you from any kind of evil magic the troll wanted to cast upon you. Steel was always good as protection. Some stories tells about people that been wandering in the woods, and they have found food and drinks put out for them on big rocks or similar. Sometimes there was also a pretty lady in fancy clothing that offered you a glass of wine, and she could be very insistent that you accept her offer. You did not want to be rude to her, just as with a lot of supernatural beings, it was always best to be polite. But it was probably safest to just put down some steel on that tablecloth before you dared to eat anything. Accepting food and drinks from a troll gave them power over you. Humans seemed to fascinate them, and sometimes they took humans into their mountains and kept them there for a while. This is a script of what Carl Lundqvist, born 1866 in a village called Garnviken, told a researcher called Margot Nilsson around the year 1928. There was a lad called Lars, and he got taken into the mountain once. He had been at a party in Vadbacken, and when he was on his way home, he got into such a thick fog. He didn't came home until 3 days later, and then he was butt naked. He never wanted to talk about what happened to him, but taken into the mountains, that he had been for sure. The trolls could also steal babies. A changeling was a troll child that the troll mother had put in the bed instead of the human child. She took the human child with her to a troll cave and left the changeling with the humans. Changeling was just like normal children, but it usually had an uncommonly big head, weak legs, and they were also much more prone to destructive behavior when it grew up, and liked to break things and be mean to both animals and other kids. They were also extremely lazy and refused to work. A way to get your own baby back was to do something very, very strange, like trying to make bread in an eggshell. Then the troll child would rise up from the crib and say something like, "I have lived so long I have seen 7 oak forests grow and rot, but never have I seen someone make bread in an eggshell." Then the troll was exposed and had to leave. Another more dangerous way was to treat the child really bad, either by whipping it or to pretend to put the baby in a hot oven. Then the troll mother came running in, threw back the human child and took the troll child with her, muttering about how mean human was, and she did not treat their child that bad. And actually, people that had gotten taken by the trolls, regardless if they were adult children, was considered to be treated very well by the trolls. They got dressed in silver and gold and got to eat very good food. If someone saw them outside of the mountain and threw some steel over the person, the spell was broken and they could come back home to the humans again. But people that had been with the trolls never was the same again. They had all kinds of strange behaviors when they got back, like always wanted to have it dark in their room, and they got very introverted and quiet and always seemed to long back to the mountain. This was of course a way to explain mental illness, just as the concept of changeling was a way to explain children with different types of illness or development disorders. Remember what I said about tragic lives in the beginning of this video? Yes, there has been actual children that have been treated horrible and even killed because they was thought to be changelings, when they instead have some kind of mental or physical disorder. Again, sorry to ruin your happy troll fantasy. Trolls are fascinating and there are a lot of fun stories about them, but since they have been an excuse and an explanation for things common people didn't understand, there will also be real life tragic that follows in the footsteps of these stories. But to end on a happier note, trolls did not always just vex human and cause mischief. Sometimes they also helped. 1936, Carl Martin Bergstrand wrote down this story, told by the old lady Johanna-Lena Emanuelsson, born in 1868. Dad talked about the fact that on the farm in Skår, where he grew up, there was a very small boy called Little Måns, 100 years ago. Once, when he was driving with an ox in the field, he heard a loud clattering from inside the ridge because the trolls were baking. Suddenly, a troll woman came out, carrying a cracked baker peel. "You will mend this for me," said the troll, "and you shall be well paid." Little Måns took a birch willow and tied the baker's peel together. When he had put it away, he suddenly got very tired and fell asleep. And when he woke up, there was bread with butter on it next to him. Well, he was hungry, so he ate the bread. He immediately began to grow and became the largest and coarsest man who has ever lived here in the area, and they called him Big Måns ever since. Dad said they had a big old pair of trousers left in his memory. Trolls have lived on in our language. We still use the wording "rich as a troll", and in Sweden there is a saying that if you speak about the trolls, they will be standing in your hallway. And there is, of course, also now a modern version of trolls, the online trolls. That the word troll is used for these people is not so strange. Trolls have been around for at least thousands of years and have been linked to something that causes mayhem and annoyance for people, just because they can. Too bad that our modern trolls isn't as easy to beat as the one that still might reside deep in the mountains, in the deep, deep forests.